Well, welcome, guys. We might have a few more people pop in just a little bit. But like I said, just keep yourself muted during the training, and if you have questions, please just unmute yourself and hop in at any time. We love for these to be interactive. They're way more fun that way. So tonight we're going to talk about compliance, and this can be kind of like a scary thing or an unsure thing, but now that we are sharing Young Living products with others, it's really important for us to use compliant language when we talk about the products that we're sharing. And when people talk about being compliant, they're really just referring to the fact that there are things that we should not say when we talk about our products. Because they are not FDA approved, we can't make any medical claims about the products. We aren't doctors. Well, there are some doctors and nurses in the group, which is really great. But when you're referring to Young Living, we don't want to diagnose, treat, or claim to cure any illnesses with these products. And that's really a protection for yourself and for Young Living. They can actually incur very large fines from their members not being compliant. And then it's actually a super freeing thing for us to be able to speak compliantly versus talking about treating illnesses and diagnosing and that kind of thing. So I've really come to see compliance as a blessing over time. At first, it was really annoying and frustrating and felt like it was limiting me from sharing my stories. But now I realize that it gives us the opportunity to share with our members how to use their Young Living products every single day to stay healthy versus just when they get the occasional sickness or headache. That would be a non-compliant word. And so I just want to share a little story with you there. If you guys are not plugged into the 12 Days of Diamonds group on Facebook, it's so good. There's so much professional development there. So many diamonds, crown diamonds, royal crown diamonds, sharing their stories and how they got to that position. But I watched a video one night of a diamond who started Young Living pre-compliance. And she talked about how thankful she actually was for compliance because it got to a point where mamas were showing up at her doorstep at 2 a.m. in the morning with sick babies that needed to be at the ER. And that's when she realized, okay, this is not okay. I am not their doctor. That's not what this is for. And so it really just freed her up and helped her to not feel so much pressure to treat these people. Basically, that wasn't her role. That wasn't her position. So that's really what compliance does for us. We have somebody on the team, Jessica Pearson. She is a lot better at explaining this than I am. So she's actually going to teach tonight and share with you guys things we can say, things we can't say. She's going to make it really easy and not scary. So Jessica, take it away. And you guys feel free, hop in, stop Jessica as she's talking, ask her questions if something doesn't make sense. And we'd love to hear specific examples. If you guys have specific questions things you're unsure how to word, definitely this is the place to do that. So, Jessica, hello.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. So I'm certainly not a compliance expert, but I did do a bit of research. And if you have participated in our new game plan, you'll see me on day 16 giving a very similar talk. So like Erin said, if you have specific questions, definitely ask them, and I will do my best to answer them from what I have researched. So I'm sure we have all heard people say that, when we're talking about oils and oily products, we want to stay above the wellness line. And so what that is going to mean for us is talking about supporting normal body functions, supporting body structures and things like that before there's dysfunction or disease or that kind of thing. So I watched a video one time of Jim Bob Hagerton, and he was talking about how drugs and medications work versus how oils work. And it really stuck with me because I think it's a great example. So basically, medications, when we're introducing synthetic medications into our body, they're replicating a body process. and they can work great. And then when we stop taking them, our body is like no more equipped to respond to the dysfunction that was creating the need for a drug than before. And so you're reliant upon that medication to have normal body function. So with oils, the way we want to think about them is that they're supporting our normal body function, normal body structures, things like that. And so if we're doing something to say support our thyroid, like if we're taking Thyromin to support our thyroid, that is helping our thyroid to function properly on its own, rather than just like replicating the function of the thyroid. Okay, so that's kind of how we want to be like thinking about using our oils. We want to be using them in a preventative way, in a supportive way, and maintaining that body function. When we are talking about like responding to things, that's where we like get into the non-compliant realm. So like, you know, when somebody is sick and you're giving them suggestions about oils, it can get a little bit tricky because, you know, if they're asking about a specific illness, we have to be really cautious about how we respond. So like Erin said, we want to think about these FDA rules as just a protection for us as distributors, as business owners, that we are not responsible for diagnosing. We are not responsible for giving treatment recommendations. We are not having to, you know, give anybody advice in terms of like, should you go to the doctor or not, things like that. So that just like puts the ownership on our oily users. We want to be giving them appropriate references and things like that, and empowering them to do research and just take that burden off of us. Ultimately, the FDA set up these rules as just a protection for consumers. And so we want to just be appreciative of that because, you know, ultimately we know we work for a great company that has really high standards, but not every natural wellness company is that way. And so it's just a protection to make sure that they're not saying things that can't be backed up by science and aren't true or are misleading. So I'll kind of go into the things we can't say first, and then we'll work our way back to the cans. Does anybody have any questions before we kind of go into those specific rules? No? Okay. Okay, so first of all, on your virtual office, in your member resources, there are documents that we can be referencing about compliance. There's a compliance letter from Gary Young, and he has some links in there to a couple of YouTube videos. There's two that I really liked and used for this. They're both called Sharing Young Living the Right Way. One is the cans, and the other one is Can't Say. And so those are really good videos to watch. The other one, Hannah Cruz does a really nice video about compliance. So that's a good one to even send to your members if people have questions. But there's also like hot words, so specific words that we don't want to be using, and then say this, not that. That has kind of jumped around in the member resources. I find that just like Google search Young Living, say this, not that, pulls it up faster. But anyway, so in terms of things that we can't say, so we want to avoid all health-related claims that are misleading, not true, can't be backed up by science. And then we want to avoid diagnosing any sort of like disease or injury. We never want to claim that oils can cure or alleviate or treat disease. So that is kind of the big thing. And that's where, you know, oftentimes it feels really restrictive because, you know, if somebody has a specific disorder, we want to be helpful and we want to give them advice. But in responding to their questions, we are often getting into kind of a zone of non-compliance. So also, you know, the disclaimer that we have at the beginning of all of our classes is great, and it's good to have it, and it's often on the bottom of slides that are from other companies and things like that, you know, that these statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. but it's not enough to protect us. So it's good, definitely include that disclaimer, but just so you're aware, you still have to follow the rules even once you've put out the disclaimer. So one of the big things that we want to really avoid is implying like that you could cure, alleviate, or treat disorders or disease. So that would be if somebody says, I've got bronchitis, what can I take? If you would say, you know, last year I took this and I felt better, even though you didn't say bronchitis, the implication is like, yes, you're giving treatment advice about bronchitis. If someone is saying, I've got an infection and my doctor wants me to take penicillin, and you say, you know what, you could use oregano and thieves instead. Again, that's implying that we're replacing a drug with oils, which we cannot do. We also can't talk about supporting or supplementing therapies or treatments. So that would be like if someone's getting chemotherapy, saying like, you can use these oils to alleviate the symptoms and side effects of your chemotherapy. Okay, so that is some of the examples of kind of implying, but also just like disease related and therapy related.
Hey, I might be jumping ahead, so you can tell me if I am, but could you give us specific examples then, like of things that we could say for those specific examples?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so so what we want to do is if somebody has a specific question about a disease state, if you respond like for the bronchitis example, if you would respond to someone saying, you know, I think I've got bronchitis, what can I take? You can talk about the like specific oils being supportive of normal respiratory function, or we love to use thieves to help, boost our immune system, or things like that. So if you're responding with the claims that have been approved by Young Living and are on their website, you know, about each of the oils, that is a perfectly acceptable way to respond to that. It's just kind of when you just are like responding with a recipe, for instance, if somebody has a specific disease related claim, that's where it gets a little bit gray. So I think really just talking about like normal, like body systems and normal function, and like we love taking Ningxia Red to combat free radicals and, you know, things like that in response. So that's kind of how you get around people's questions. And so we're going to talk a little bit too about the say this, not that. But I really like that this document, especially when people have questions on Facebook, so that, you know, you can formulate a response that is compliant. Sometimes in person, it's a little bit tricky. And it's a little gray because I think, you know, who knows what we say in person, but we know, the Lord knows we should be compliant. Okay.
Hey, Jessica.
Yes, ma'am.
Kelly. So I had a question the other day on Facebook. Someone said their 17-month-old had issues with diarrhea. Mm-hmm. And so when I first responded, I said diarrhea, and then I realized that was wrong. So I went back and changed it and said, hey, we use Digize for our stomach support. So is that a way to kind of respond to that?
Yes. Yeah, that's okay. A perfect example. So if someone is saying, yeah, we've got diarrhea, whatever, you could say, we love using Digize to support, you know, our GI tract or our stomach, bowels, things like that, because that is what we use Digize for. So that kind of actually brings us into what we can say. So the nice thing is, although it seems like there's a lot of can'ts and there's a lot of hot words and things like that, there is a lot we can say. And so actually, let me just back up a little bit and just mention specifically like anti-words, antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial, things like that. Those are words that really can get people into a lot of trouble in terms of compliance. So just be mindful that if you can't back up what you're saying with a scientific study, we can't use any of those words. That being said, there are scientific studies that say, like, cinnamon bark is shown to fight the staph bug. And so if you can properly cite that study, and that study did not include Young Living products, that is okay. So like, you could talk about cinnamon bark, but you couldn't say like thieves is antibacterial. You can't interpret that study and or like selectively use parts of the study to support, like, this is why thieves is antibacterial, because this study showed that cinnamon bark has antibacterial properties with this specific bacteria. So, but those studies you absolutely can share, and I encourage you to, because I think they're really persuasive to people to kind of see some of those studies. But like I said, they need to be properly cited. They can't reference a Young Living product. We can't paraphrase it. We can't interpret it or selectively cite. So in terms of what we can say, we can talk about supporting, affecting, and maintaining overall wellness and specific body structures and functions. Again, normal body function. So we can talk about nutrition that is generally recognized to support certain body systems. So we can talk about the protein powder helping to like build muscle tissue, because we all know that like protein is a building block of muscle tissue, and that is common knowledge. It's generally recognized by the public. So we can talk about that. We can talk about vitamin C, things like that. So that is perfectly acceptable. The other thing we can talk about are age-related conditions, natural body functions, and occasional emotional states. So I'm going to give you a few examples of things just to kind of free you up a little bit, because there are a lot of them. So for instance, if somebody has a question about menstruation, PMS, cramps, bloating, all of that, that is a normal body function. That's not a disease. It's not a disorder. Unfortunately, that is a normal body function. And so we can talk about using our oils to help alleviate some of the discomforts associated with that normal body function. If you have mild mood changes throughout the month, we can talk about using different oils to support us through those mild mood changes, or, you know, hot flashes, non-cystic acne for, you know, anybody really. But like if a teenager has acne or whatever, we can talk about using skin cleansing oils to help, you know, support them with acne. If someone has age-related hair loss, we can talk about oils to help support their scalp, support hair growth. If you have age-related memory loss, like I said, mood, like stress, occasional anxiety, all of those things, unfortunately, are so normal that we can talk about them freely and openly. So those are just a few examples of some of the kind of normal, typical things we can discuss. The other things we can talk about freely are the few products that Young Living has that are FDA approved, and they've done the approval for them. And so we, kind of the reason that everything isn't FDA approved, just the short answer is that once we would get everything FDA approved, it would kind of enter things into a pharmaceutical medical system. Oils wouldn't be available to everybody. It would have to go through your insurance. So it doesn't meet the like mission and vision of Young Living to have all of their oils and all of their products be FDA approved, because it really controls them more than Young Living wants. They're not freely available to everybody. But they have gone through the FDA approval for several products. And so like Thieves Cough Drops, the Seedlings Diaper Rash Cream, Mineral Sunscreen, Insect Repellent, Cool Azul Pain Relief Cream have all been approved by the FDA. And we can talk about those like the products, are. So we talk about sunscreen helping you prevent sunburns. If you make something at home for sunscreen, you cannot talk about it as sunscreen. The only thing we can talk about is those Young Living approved products in that way. If you can buy it at a drugstore, generally speaking, it's FDA approved. And so if you're making a DIY version of it, you typically can't talk about it in that way. That's why we see people have like critter spray or like outdoor spray or, things like that, kind of like funny labeling. But it's just so that we can kind of get around implying that our oily products are replacing a drug product or an over-the-counter product. The other things that we can talk about is if it is a claim on the Young Living website for an oil, like if we say like grapefruit has great skin cleansing properties and that is on their website, absolutely you can say that, okay? So the last thing I just want to briefly touch on is the vitality oils. So that is an FDA thing as well, is using oils internally versus topically and aromatically. And so if you are talking about ingesting oils or putting them in your food, just please be vigilant about saying vitality, lemon vitality, orange vitality, things like that, when you're like sharing recipes and things. So that helps us to be compliant as well. And if you have people asking about like, what's the difference, that kind of thing, you can explain to them it's a labeling difference. It's because the FDA doesn't they don't really understand that oils can be used kind of in 3 different modalities. That's really uncommon in like the medical world. And so Young Living has developed the vitality oils as an internal line so that we can speak about them internally. But then those vitality oils do not have topical or aromatic uses labeled on them. So you can explain to your people, like we do use them interchangeably because there's not constituent differences between the oils. It's a labeling difference, but in general, just to be really cautious with compliance, talk about vitality whenever we're talking about internal use. So, sorry, lots of info. Any questions right now? Okay. So the last thing I'm just going to talk about is some examples of like say this, not that. So I'll just show you, this is what the say this, not that document looks like. Like I said, I Googled it, but I have seen it on the member resources before. And so, for example, if somebody says, like my father has Alzheimer's, could he take MindWise? Would MindWise help my father with Alzheimer's? You could instead say, I use MindWise as part of a healthy diet and lifestyle to support normal brain function and cognition. So they're talking about a specific disease-related thing, and we can just respond with normal brain function, normal cognition, talk about that. If you're talking about, like the bad example is like, I diffuse joy for my depression. You could instead say, I diffuse joy for a warm and comforting aroma. Okay, so just kind of using some of those product claims from the website.
What about like mood boosting?
I think mood boosting is acceptable. I don't think if someone is talking specifically about depression, I think responding, again, just saying like this helps to, like the comforting aroma helps to like boost my mood. And so I love diffusing joy for that reason. I think that's an acceptable way to respond. But like if somebody was like, man, I just am having a down day, absolutely. You can be like, citrus oils are really uplifting, or I love doing stress away, or, things like that.
Jessica, I put on there a couple times, I called Joy and Orange my happy blend. Is that okay?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Because, I mean, we all have varying moods, and so it's an occasional mood state. I think it's perfectly acceptable. So, but this just probably gives 12 examples here. One of the ones I wanted to point out too is it's an example about sulfurs on treating inflammation. So first of all, we never would want to be like, I use this to treat blah, 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 because that already is kind of opening us up to trouble by using the treat word. But you could say, I use sulfurs to nutritionally support recovery time and acute inflammation associated with exercise. So like chronic inflammation would be more of a like dysfunction, but acute inflammation related to exercise is normal. That is when we exercise, we always see acute inflammation. That's how you get more muscle. That's how, that kind of thing. That's normal. So if you have like muscle soreness after working out, that's a perfectly acceptable thing to use oils for, and tell people I use oils for this after a long run when I'm sore, because that's a normal body function. It's not a disease state. It's not, a problematic thing. I think unless you guys want other examples or have other questions, I think that's all I have for you tonight. Does anyone have like specific questions that are statements that people have said that you've not been sure if they are on the up and up? No.
Jessica, it's Kelly again. What about with thieves? Because I know there have been some tests like the little dishes and things. And I know it's hard not to say anti and what, is there any leeway with that? With the thieves cleaner? I'm talking about the cleaner.
With the cleaner. I think with the cleaner, we should really look at kind of how Young Living describes the product. Like I said, I think a lot of those studies are really compelling and they're cool to see. And I definitely still show people like the comparison of like Clorox to thieves, that kind of thing, when I can. But I think our description of that, if we are sharing that like experiment or whatever, we just need to be really cautious about like, see, this shows that Thieves Cleaner is like antibacterial and antifungal or whatever. I think we can talk about, I had mentioned this on our last Zoom call, but I think we can talk about like Thieves creates an unfriendly environment for microbes. And I think that is safe. But to be really cautious, I would go back and look at how Young Living describes the cleaner, and talk about it in those terms.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Doesn't, in our scripts and stuff, doesn't it say for Thieves that Thieves has such and such property? The oils in Thieves have such and such properties?
Yeah.
Because
So
that's how I've been saying it, because that's how the script says it. It says that Thieves has these oils which have such and such properties, antibacterial, anti-inflammatory. They have all of these properties.
Yeah. So yes, we can say like the Thieves blend includes oils that have these properties.
Yeah, that's how
if we have a study to show, in fact, that is correct. So, and so that's like kind of the tricky part is I think a lot of the times, a lot of the scripts, even coming from, like Sarah's book or things that have been kind of passed down through our team or things that you can find online or whatever, like, it's great. And the hope is that like somebody did the research and that somebody has the study. But we've had this come up in other ways as well, where people have said like, where does that fact come from? Where does that statistic come from? And so, you know, my advice is just like, if it feels like in that thieves example, like, you know what, if somebody asked me to like show them where it said that cinnamon bark was antifungal, I'm not sure I could show them, then I would caution you against saying it. And so a few people, you know, have removed things from the script that they use because they've just, you know, either had people ask or they've just been uncomfortable saying it unless they can show where, you know, where that information comes from. So I think, yes, you can say that if you have the study to kind of show it. And so, like, I just recently sent somebody, Eric Rory he has like an example where he shows different essential oils and like, I think the staph bug or whatever. And so I sometimes will like show that or talk about that because I know I can cite his study. Yeah.
Okay. And also anything that, because I know several oils, Young Living has said that this oil has anti-inflammatory properties in their description. So anytime Young Living says that, then yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, so yeah, I just think, yeah, to be, you know, the safest business owners possible, you know, certainly just like really using the claims directly from their website. I think a lot of times, you know, we have non-compliant references that are really great and really useful. And certainly like I use non-compliant references all the time. But that's where it gets a little bit problematic, is when we're like using, you know, wording and things from non-compliant references,
right,
putting them in our scripts and teaching them at classes and things like that. And that's why, like, initially, you know, even a few years ago, like Rachel used to use a lot of testimonies in her 101, and then a lot of that has been removed because the testimonies tend to be non-compliant. And so we've kind of removed that.
You just have to take your testimony and make it compliant.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, one thing too about some of those testimonies, like there's a laundry testimony in there about like getting stains out. And I think that's a perfectly compliant testimony about stains. You know, just to kind of remember that like a lot of the household stuff, we're like we don't need to worry about that. That's fine. It's really the like medical.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We have just a few more minutes left, and thank you, Jessica, so much. That's super helpful. You always do a fabulous job explaining, and I appreciate all the research that you did to teach us tonight. I am still learning, y'all. Every time I hear this information, I'm learning new things. I'm thinking about ways that I can be more compliant. I'm thinking about scripts that need to be updated for you guys. So much grace. Thank you for having grace with me and with our other leaders, and patience as we really try to clean up these resources for you guys and make it easy. One thing I want to leave you with is to not leave this conversation fearful of sharing. We want you to know, like, you can still share stories. Stories are super powerful. I would just encourage you to spend some time thinking through your story, your Young Living story, your testimonies, your experiences, and think strategically about how you can change out some of those hot words and talk about support. My story is started with chronic urinary issues. And so now I talk about healthy urinary support, you know, function and health. And so I can talk about supporting that system. So there are still ways that you can share your testimony. So don't be fearful about that. If you've been sharing non-compliantly, I think we have less than a minute. I'm going to give you guys just a couple of things that you can do. Check your Twitter, your Facebook pages, your Instagram, your Pinterest boards, and start kind of filtering through some of that stuff and deleting deleting some of the things that are non-compliant that talk about disease-related things. Look for those hot words that Jessica mentioned. And then something you guys can do on our page is to really help me out is when you see your new members ask questions that are non-compliant. If you'll help me with responding compliantly and talking about supporting body systems, those things really start to trickle down to our new members. We don't expect our new members to, not ask about allergies when that's what they got their kit for or whatever. But if we can start phrasing our answers compliantly, then they start seeing how we speak about oil usage, and it really does start to trickle down. And again, it's going to free you up. I would really caution you about using Pinterest as a resource. Lots of non-compliant stuff there. But when a friend sends you a message about a particular situation, do send them to reference guides. Send them to reference materials, show them how to use their reference books, and it's really going to empower them to find their own solutions and help them to see that you just don't have all this up in your head. Like, I'm not keeping all of this knowledge up in my head. It really helps it to be more duplicable and more like, oh, I could do this too. I could share too, because they're using this reference guide. They're looking up answers. So I think it's going to cut us off in a minute, but I just wanted to say thank you again to Jessica tonight. We appreciate that so much. And she does have a great education in the medical field. I love when we have nurses and doctors that are just kind of changing the conversation about what it looks like to bring in natural